Welcome back. Financial journalists around the world are still sifting through some 2,000 leaked documents that show how some of the world's biggest banks move dirty money around the world. The documents come from FinCen. It's the US Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. FinCen is part of the US Treasury. It receives suspicious activity reports similar to SARS. Banks worldwide now have to fill these in, even if the transactions take place outside the US. The amounts of money involved are staggering. $2 trillion. At one estimate. Kokkie Kooyman is the Executive Director and Portfolio Manager at Denker Capital. Kokkie, good evening to you. Banks have certain duties if they believe the money that is flowing through them is tainted or the result of corruption. What are they supposed to do?
Well, bear in mind firstly that the BuzzFeed information, or well, effectively the leaks from the files that BuzzFeed fed, relate to transactions covering 1999 to 2017. So a lot of this is historic, and a lot of it has been dealt with as well. But let's firstly talk about what the responsibility of banks are. Banks are supposed to, and by law, report suspicious transactions and or accounts to their relevant authorities. In South Africa, we've got the FICA Act, which covers that. But then it's the authorities who have to take this action further. In South Africa, we had the case of the Gupta accounts. You recall that banks, in the end, forced or closed accounts of the Guptas because they were very worried about those accounts. So you've had similar instances in the world. We've had quite a few cases in Denmark, in the Netherlands, ING. There were quite a few banks who, in the past, often unwittingly, were part of money laundering, or where they had clients that were laundering money, specifically from Russia. A big case recently also was a Swedbank, largest bank in Sweden, where an affiliate of theirs in Estonia and Latvia was moving Russian money into the West.
Okay, so Kokkie, I'm sorry to interrupt you. As I understand it, what this does is that it allows people to launder money. So they make their money corruptly in whichever country it is. Russia is the example that you've given. They're then able to get that money out of the country through one of these banks, HSBC or Deutsche Bank or whatever it is. We see this coming from time to time. Are the banks just taking the fine, taking the hit, and trucking on because it doesn't matter? Is it the price of doing business and lucrative business?
No. Well, that's what I'm saying. There's part of it is history, in that banks didn't have the systems to detect this. In recent years, banks have been spending a lot of money on technology to detect these systems, so these fraudulent transactions. So you'll find a lot of the actions were prior to 2017. So banks now, if they are now caught with facilitating such a transaction without reporting it to the authorities, will be fined heavily. And at the moment, banks have been fined for doing it pre-2017, but not so heavily because the regulations weren't in place then.
Okay, so some of the banks might actually, we'll see this information, but it's not going to hurt them at all because it's historic.
Well, the authorities must take the further action. So you're right. And now it does actually hurt the banks. If a bank is caught doing such a transaction, they will get fined heavily. In the past, they have been fined, and in fact, a lot of the CEO of ING in the Netherlands is still actually being prosecuted for not having stepped in when he supposedly knew that the transactions were taking place. But yes, the banks have now a very strong regulation preventing that, but 10 years ago, that regulation wasn't there. And I think a lot of these instances were from that period. The second very important thing is that in the case of the US, 2,100 of these transactions were reported to the authorities, but no action was taken. Similarly, here in South Africa, we've had a lot of transactions reported to our government, or the monetary authorities, and also where it seems action wasn't taken.
Kokkie Kooyman, really do appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed from Denker Capital.